So it's 8 o'clock, so we've been going for quite an hour, close to, and we'll have plenty of chance to talk again with you. I mean, throughout your questions. But if you do have questions or comments, and it can be one or the other, just raise your hand, please, and the mic will come to you. And please wait for that before you articulate your question.
Hello there.
Hi there.
First of all, it's a comment and then a question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for putting this on. And I've been a fan of your father, just for Danny, by the way. I've been a fan of your father for a long, long time. His work has been amazing to me.
Yes.
And to see him in this light is just amazing.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm a child from a psychiatrist.
Do you hear that? Sorry, go ahead.
She didn't say what light it was. But I did hear it. And I appreciated it.
Okay. My father was a psychiatrist, and he was one of the good ones.
Yeah.
He did a lot of work with PTSD for refugees and people that survived Salvadorian War. And I'm a survivor. I'm a child soldier, past child soldier, and I was very resentful to him because during the war, my mother chose to stay and fight, and he left, and he built a new family for himself and a new career. And then I met him when I was older, and a lot of things have happened then. And I found myself living with a new family in a new country with this man who everybody adored. But to me, he was just this asshole who left me. And my question to you is, like, I thought by the end of my relationship with my father, after he passed away, I thought we broke the code because I chose not to see him as my father, but see him as my friend. And once I stopped calling him Dad and I started calling him Joe, all of a sudden this whole world of possibilities opened for us.
Yes.
And he became my friend.
Yes.
And he was fascinating and interesting and smart. And we had the most amazing conversations. We could run together one year. And it was just amazing because we had this amazing relationship. But once he passed away, all this came flowing back. He became again the asshole who left me. So my question to you, Daniel, is your father is so well known and so well respected, and so many people admire, and he has helped so many people.
Yes.
Do you feel, not resentful, but do you feel like his chosen profession was something that maybe added to the stress of your relationship with him, the way that everybody saw him, and then everything that you did was a reflection of him, perhaps?
Thank you for that question. So the answer is going to be paradoxical, I think. Like a lot of what we're looking at here are contradictions and tensions. On the one hand, I wouldn't change a single thing about who my father is, especially not who he is in the world. I am 100% on Team Gabor when it comes to him, because he is someone who, he's lived an amazing life. He came out of near impossible circumstances and came to this country at age 13. And look at what he's done, and look at what he's doing. And when he got the Order of Canada, I was so proud. And he probably couldn't have gotten that Order of Canada if he hadn't been a workaholic. I mean, all of his flaws that he's written about at length and with great humility have also driven him to do a lot of fantastic work in the world and give a lot of himself to people. Now, him and my mom might have something different to say about the workaholism, but so the very things that I don't think it was his career or his gifts that made my childhood difficult, but it does complicate the relationship now, certainly. And yeah, the question of being in his shadow is certainly something I've had to deal with, especially stepping into this role of working alongside him and writing a book with him. And I've had 2 books, that's right. And what it's been perfect for is, and by the way, I love what you said about you sort of, for a while at least, being able to remove him from the dad pedestal and just have him as Joe, And I'd love to do that with him. I would, and the more wholeness I feel in myself, the less I need to relate to him as father figure. Because father carries all these connotations. But when I'm just Daniel and fully in my power, which is, increasingly something that I have some access to, and I'm, coming into it bit by bit at age 43, the less I need father-type things from him, and the less weak I feel in his presence, and the less I resent him for the ways in which he doesn't measure up to the fantasy father in my head. And as far as his public profile, I just want a private relationship with my dad. I want an authentic one-on-one relationship with him, not with the person he thinks he is, not with the person the world tells him he is, but with the person he is, and with me as I am, seen through the eyes of a father who's willing to sit down next to me and actually see me, and not expect me to see him in a particular way. So, I hope that answers your question. It's a whole world, this relationship, and I think it is for all of us.
If I may, thank you, Daniel. If I may say also, thank you for that question, and I'd love to get that story from you. It's a wonderful story for a book. Would make a wonderful teaching, really. If I may tell you how I see it, if that's okay with you. You remember I was talking about these parts that we have to ourselves. So when you put your father aside as the father figure and you just saw him as Joe, another part of you stepped up. The part of you that stepped up was the adult part that could just appreciate the person for what they have to give and who they are and what you can enjoy or be upset about them, but it was just right there in the present. The child part that was so hurt by the father and your anger and calling him certain names is simply the anger, simply the pain. It had not been fully resolved. It had not been worked with. You just put it aside. You just put her aside. When he died, that child came back in again. So it's not that you did anything. It's that different parts of you, both totally authentic parts, neither were pretense. Both were totally authentic parts showed up at different times, and that's what you experienced.
Hi there.
Oh,
hi.
perfect.
Hi.
Go for it. Yeah, excellent.
So first and foremost, I wanted to thank you guys for hosting this. So my parents were immigrants, and so they spent a lot of hours working really hard to pay the bills, and of course that meant less time to give me love and attention. And growing up, I didn't perceive their hard work towards paying the bills as a form of love, which I know now is a form of love. But I feel like there is that disconnection between our relationships. And now that I'm a grown adult, I want to try to reconnect with them and form a very authentic relationship rather than the daughter-father or daughter-mother paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of what this entire weekend is about. When we say hello again, a fresh start for parents and their adult children. I'm assuming your parents are not in the room?
No, thank
Right.
God.
What'd you say?
Thank God, no.
They're not. Yeah. What we mean is the fresh start would be having a relationship in the present moment. A relationship that's based on who each of you is now. Now, do you sense that your parents would be open to your invitation to discuss this kind of stuff? Or are they the kind of parents who just don't want to go there and that's not just part of their vocabulary?
Both. So a mix of both.
A mix of both, okay.
They're definitely not the touchy-feely kind of parents.
Right.
So when you're with them, what does it feel like for you? Who are you when you're with them?
I feel like I have to measure up, and I have to
Okay, now hold on.
continuously.
This is where my coaching comes in. That's not a feeling, that's an opinion or a point of view. What do you feel when you believe you have to measure up?
That's a good question. Inadequate.
That's not a feeling either. That's an opinion or a point of view.
It's a perception,
It's a
right?
perception.
Or a belief.
What do you feel when you believe you're inadequate?
Sad.
Okay. Anything else?
frustration.
Okay. So there's some anger there.
Yes.
Okay, so sadness and anger. Fair enough. Okay. What if you knew in your heart, you really knew in your heart and mind, your soul, that you're not inadequate at all? You're actually a really complete, worthwhile human being. What if you really believed that?
Then I would stop measuring up.
Then you'd stop expecting them to take away your sense of inadequacy, right?
Yeah.
Now, they may have been the source of that sense on your part when you were small. That's the complication here. But they're no longer the source of it. Who is the source of it?
Me?
Yeah. So even if they don't do a stitch of work in this field, if you dealt with that part of you, and it's not all of you either, because you don't everywhere believe that you're inadequate.
Yeah.
It's very contextual. So if you dealt with that part, somebody else totally different would show up for your parents. Mm-hmm. And somebody would completely open up without them having done a thing differently. You know what? Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And this relates to something that we were going to say tonight or sometime tomorrow. And it's a guiding principle of our work here. And this is especially for those of you who are here without somebody else present in the room who you're working on the relationship with, but it's equally there for people who have someone here. Like I said before, we come to a relationship course. I didn't say this. We come to a relationship course and we think we're going to work on the relationship, i.e. when you think of a relationship, you think about the between, right? A relationship is between you and your parents. Mm-hmm. And all the stuff that goes on between you and your parents. The words that get exchanged, the looks, the body language, the emotions, all of that. Mm-hmm. But what if I told you that the majority of your relationship is not between you and your parents at all? The majority of your relationship is within you.
Yeah. Period.
And if you relate to it that way, which doesn't mean cutting them out of the mix, because if it's totally within you, then you don't need them, right? Go off and have a relationship with your parents in your mind on the beach. But it's like the prep work, the groundwork for the relationship, the context for the relationship happens a lot over here in terms of what you're expecting and who you're being and your perceptions and your points of view. And that's the bulk of what we're going to be looking at this week. And then at the very end of the weekend, we're going to look at, okay, now how do you get the two people together and maybe design some stuff and set some intentions? And that's an important piece. But what we want to encourage you with is that you have a lot of power in the situation to alter the quality of the relationship simply by looking at your view of them and your view of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was raised in a cult for the first 16 years of my life, and I'm the fourth generation of my family to be raised in the cult. Mm-hmm. Both me and my mom are no longer in it. Mm-hmm. But my dad is still inside, and so is my mom's mom. And we both have a lot of residual anger from our past, and it kind of falls on deaf ears because the cult that they're in doesn't allow them to see things from our point of view.
When you say they, do you mean your father and other members of the family?
Yes, due to the programming that they have.
Yeah.
So everything that we feel is invalid as a result of that. So it kind of falls on deaf ears, and I'm just wondering how can you heal or move forward in a relationship with a parent when they're not willing to hear any of they're not willing to communicate, I can't talk, they're not willing to communicate honestly with you.
Okay, so let me just get clear on something. Because in the situation of some cults, there's just no contact at all with family members, right? You go off to some compound, you don't even speak to your family.
This is Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay. So we're not here to rule on what a cult is and isn't, right? They're part of an organization that you have some opinions about. and you have some strong feelings about, and that you've chosen to no longer be a part of. Can we say that's true?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, great. They see it differently. Do they still want to have a relationship with you?
As long as I'm not open about who I am.
No, but hold on a second. It's a yes or no question. Are they interested in a relationship with you? Has their cult said you can't have a relationship with your daughter, for instance?
That's where I'm at a crossroads, because if I'm not honest with myself about who I am, they will tell me they're not allowed to have a relationship with me anymore.
Okay. Well, if it's that cut and dried, if it's literally that cut and dried, and I'm taking your word for it, right? Because you're the one who's telling me the story. So I can imagine a scenario, and I'm just making this up, in which a person's in a religious movement or religious cult or whatever you want to call it, and they have a daughter who's gay or a son who's gay, and that cult has a strong proscription against homosexuality. And the parent says, I want to be in a relationship with you, but you have to go to conversion therapy. Well, okay. It's kind of cut and dry there, right? Because at a certain point, being who you are and being authentic to yourself becomes more important. Like I said, the parent-child relationship. Just let me finish, please. Yeah. Is optional. We have the option of saying, you know what, I don't want you in my life. If it's that cut and dry. I can't tell from your question if it actually is, or if there's some interpretation going on in what you're hearing. But I do know that you being authentic to yourself is 100% a legitimate and valid concern for you. And if it really came down to it, I wouldn't give that up. But I can't tell, and maybe Gabor will ask some questions that'll help hone in on whether there's actually something possible here.
Well, where are you again? Just can I see your hand? Okay, thank you. You said, I'm just taking a phrase that you used. You said that what you say falls on deaf ears, right? That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Okay. What if they were actually deaf? They actually gone deaf, stone deaf. Not even the most sophisticated hearing aids would allow them to hear a sound. Would you keep trying to talk to them?
No.
In vocalized language? Would you?
No.
Okay. How would you feel if all of a sudden your parents really did go stone deaf, that they just couldn't hear you?
That would suck.
Sorry?
That would suck.
How would you feel?
Frustrated.
You'd be frustrated?
And angry.
Would you be angry at them?
No, more I feel like I couldn't express myself. And
well, how would you feel if your parents went deaf?
Let's say they had an injury.
Not only did they go deaf, they also went blind. They couldn't even read your hand signals or your writing. How would you feel?
sorry for them.
Sorry for them is not so much an emotion inside yourself. What was the emotion inside you? You'd feel bad for them, yes. What would you feel yourself?
Frustration. I don't know what else I should feel.
It's interesting that you go to the frustration right away, which is the anger part. How about sad?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you feel sad?
Yeah.
Would you feel some grief?
Mm-hmm.
Would you?
Yeah.
And in feeling sorry for them, I hear compassion. You'd feel love.
Yeah. I would feel like
Okay.
I wish better
Well,
for them.
But what if I said to you, and you know what, I'm less reticent than Daniel is to agree with you about what you said about Jehovah's Witnesses. I've read about them enough to know that it's very cult-like, and I know what the price that people have to pay when they assert their own authenticity, when they no longer sign on with the beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden they become persona non grata. It happens in all religions.
Yeah.
You know, and there are certain Jewish sects that if you marry outside the faith, you're considered dead. They actually perform mourning for you, and that's the end of it. So this happens in all over the world. And so I know what you said about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I agree with you. I'm not questioning.
Thank you.
I'm not questioning the perception that you have. It's accurate as far as I can tell from the outside. But I'm saying something here, which is that if your parents went blind and deaf, you would just grieve. You would just accept it. You couldn't do anything about it, could you?
No.
Could you bring back their sight? Could you bring back their hearing?
No, you just have to accept.
You'd accept it, and you'd have a lot of grief. And I'm suggesting that your problem at this point is your unwillingness to grieve. You want it to be different than the way it is. And that grief, or that unwillingness, and it's not an accusation. This is very natural. I totally understand how you feel. I'm just saying that's the missing part. The part of you that's willing to grieve. Because if you grieved, then you would also have the compassion. Like, what would you feel about people that were so blind and deaf that they lived in the very narrow sense of reality, whose whole world consisted of what this organization told them was reality?
And so afraid that if they stepped outside of it,
They're totally afraid of the whole world and the way it really is.
Yeah.
Because their childhoods, I'm telling you, were so threatening that they have to have this very narrow perspective inside which to exist. Otherwise, they feel utterly bewildered and terrified. That's your parents' reality. Okay? And if you could grieve it, really allow yourself to feel the sadness and just get it. That's how it is for them. You would no longer be, you would just get on with your life, and then all kinds of things would open up for you. So I'm suggesting here is that what you need to do here, if I can give you a prescription, is to really allow yourself to grieve. Because they're deaf and they're blind, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Very true.
right now there's nothing
Right
you can
now,
do about it. And it's only right now.
who knows what might happen with time, but
Yeah.
this is how it is. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is going to be a very light evening, isn't it? Just what we expected.
A little light entertainment.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
I just want to say how actually riveting it is to watch you guys interact together. It's the authenticity is incredibly inspiring.
Now, could you hold the mic a bit closer?
Oh, sure.
She called us riveting, authentic, and inspiring.
I know. I just want you to say it louder.
Yeah, I completely. I'm riveted by seeing the dynamic and like your courage to actually show it so authentically. I'm here with my mom.
Oh.
And we have done a lot of work, I think, individually on our relationship, and we're looking forward to this workshop together. And what really resonated with me earlier and what you were talking about was the word contempt. It was a word that I found my own noticing last year, and I lived in a state of contempt for probably about 20 years since I was a teenager. And when I noticed it, I was very hard on myself about it. I really felt really awful about it, and have been working to shift that. It's also something that we feel in our family from another family member directed towards us often. So I actually have a question for both of you, which is, like, Daniel, how do you shift the contempt? Like, how do you transmute it when you feel it?
Yeah.
And Gabor, how when you receive it, what do you do with that?
Great question. And it's a new noticing for me. It's only a word that's occurred to me this week, you know. So I'm with you in the exploration. I don't know that I have any ready answers, but again, and I think, as with most answers I'm going to give, it's kind of a yes and. It's both sides. We can add a new. Speaking of Joni Mitchell, we can add a new verse to both sides now. Say, I've looked at contempt from both sides now. On the one hand, if you think of contempt of court, Well, there's a lot of courts that deserve to be held in contempt. You know that scene that was that old Al Pacino movie, And Justice for All, when the judge says, "You're out of order," and he says, "No, you're out of order, you're out of order." And of course, as the crowd, we're rooting for him because he's calling out a corrupt and illegitimate system. He's pointing out the holes. And he's standing up for a bigger principle than just obedience to a structure, right? And for a lot of us kids, I think, one of our gifts and our curses is that if we're sensitive, if we're empathic, we're very, very sensitive to illegitimate power and illegitimate rigid structures that could curtail our authenticity by their very design, and that are so insidious that they can't even be named in the family structure. And these are there. They're actually there. And in some sense, it's a gift to be able to see it. However, it's a curse if we get trapped in the position of being Al Pacino, yelling all the time. So the answer is, and we have to just get really honest and say there's a part of me, at least, that would love to be Al Pacino yelling all the time. I get off on it. I get off on the outrage and the indignation, and it lends my words a certain kind of force, and it feels really certain, and I'm Mighty Mouse.
You noticed it.
Yes, I have. So it's actually similar, I think, to Gabor's very, I think, brilliant answer to the previous questioner, which is that on some level, the contempt is a postponement of my grieving. Because if I can stay in contempt, I don't have to feel any vulnerability. When I get really related to what it was like as a child to grow up in a home where the goalposts were always shifting, and reality was never certain, there's some stuff to feel. And when I start feeling that stuff, the wind goes out of my sails. I can't maintain the crusade anymore. I can't keep up the climactic monologue. I have to just kind of let myself feel it. And then, here's the kicker, trust that I'm not going to get taken advantage of or done wrong by while my defenses are down. And that requires a new kind of trust that I have to generate now in the present. And if I can do what he said earlier, which is to see who's really in front of me now, probably makes it easier, because for all of us, it's probably likely that most of our parents are less of a threat to us now than they were back then. And most parents just love their kids and really would like to listen if they could get the junk out of their ears. So I just got a big thumbs up. So that's really my answer about contempt and what I do with it. Now, do I do it yet? No, not yet, because I'm just discovering this now. But that's my new curriculum, I think, with contempt, is to, on the one hand, not to take on the, oh my God, I'm disrespecting my father, don't I know who he is in the world, blah, blah, like not to listen to his ego and his indignation.
But you know perfectly well that's what my ego would say. I don't stand on who I am out in the world. That's a caricature.
Well, never mind who you are in the world, but don't you know who I am for you? And
yeah, that's different.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So, but not to take that on, that guilt trip, because that's a trip, really. But to take on, okay, cool. I have the gift of sight. I can see things that maybe are off. Let me feel what that feels like. Let me find the real power in me, which is with my heart. Let me relate to who's actually in front of me. And let me remember what my actual intentions are in this relationship, and not get derailed by some ego trip of my own, which says I'm the conquering, the mouse that roared, with contempt.
Thank you for... I was going to say thank you for finishing, but
another thumbs up from the crowd for my length.
Yeah, it is similar to the previous question. The part of you, I'm speaking to the Jehovah's Witness question again, but it relates to this one. the part of you that you don't need your parents to hear you. You did at some point. You don't need them to hear you. You'd like them to hear you. It'd be nice. But if you hear yourself, your authentic self speaking, you don't need anybody to hear you. The part of you that's desperate and feels frustrated is the child part. And we all have these different parts. And it's the same with this contempt. So how I deal with the contempt now, I've learned something this week as well. I really did. For one thing, I do have this neural expectancy to be seen and respected. But the world's always not going to give that to me. It's not always going to give that to me. I've never minded people arguing with me or disagreeing. I never cared about that. What would enrage me is when they would not understand me and then would argue with what they understood I was saying, which wasn't what I was saying at all. So it's the not being seen that is my trigger. But that's only a trigger to the extent that I don't see myself and that I rely on others to see me so that I can feel seen. I can perceive myself as being seen. So with the contempt, the degree to which I'll react to it has a lot to do with how much am I respecting myself at that moment. Because if I'm really respecting myself at that moment, my son experiencing contempt is not a threat to me. Or it's a threat only to the extent that I'm not respecting myself. So, but if I'm not, then I'll react with defensiveness and so on. What I learned this week is it's okay for him to have his view of me. I mean, that view might be, it might be okay, it's okay for him to have a view of me that doesn't cohere to my own view of myself.
Your bunny ears are so crazy right now.
What are you saying?
I'm making a joke. I have a view of you that you've got big bunny ears.
Oh, I see, okay. It's got nothing to do with Bugs Bunny and What's Up, Doc? Or,
No. It was absurdist.
Yeah. What was I saying? Oh yeah. It's okay for my son to have a view of me that isn't consistent with my view of myself at that moment. And I never expect my kids to respect me because I've written books or given speeches.
Yeah.
That's total nonsense. So it's like you said. It's like I want you to see me for who I am in this situation right now with you. But what I learned this week actually, and there's that little New Age book called The Four Agreements. Some of you know it, by Miguel Carlos Ruiz. And he said, and one of the four agreements is, don't take anything personally. And actually this week I learned not to take Dan's view of me or my perception of Dan's view of me personally. It's his view and he's entitled to it. So if he's got a view of me at that moment that inspires or evokes contempt in him, that's his view of me. That's okay. That's okay. And as long as I can hold on to myself, I can be fairly sure that view is going to shift for him. So that's how I relate to it now. This is how I'd like to relate to it from now on. And it was a new learning for me. In practice. In theory, I've always known it, but in practice, it was new learning for me. It's okay for him to have a different view of me than I'd like him to have.
I'm looking forward to this relationship. It's okay for me to have a view of you? My God. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
There were a few pieces that you brought up that really stood out to me, and I wanted to hear some further comment on them. So I really liked what you said when you're as a parent. I'm not a parent. I'm a child. This is my mom.
Yeah.
And when you said that a parent desires their child to see the whole person, their whole person, the parent in the context of their own experience before they were a parent. And then this idea of multiple segments or pieces of self. And I think for me, I've always seen my mom in the context of her life, and I wrestle with integrating that with also desiring a mom-daughter relationship. And ironically, as I've aged and I'm now a professional and I'm grown, that dynamic has eased and integrated. But I'm just wondering if you can comment a little bit on integrating those multiple segments and the different parts, different roles that we play in life, the equal that sees the context of our parent with the child that has some neural expectancy, or a parent who has some neural expectancy.
When you say integrating the different parts, do you mean the different parts within yourself?
Yes, the different parts within yourself,
Yeah.
or the different roles, I suppose you could say.
Well, the way you integrate them.
I'll let you take this one a minute. Just take a quick.
Sure, yeah. The way you integrate them, it's lifelong work. But the way you integrate them is, first of all, you accept them all. You 100% accept them all. A month and a half ago in Budapest, Hungary, I was working with a group, and there was a woman there with a part she really hated, who she called her Adolf Hitler. Just murderous, world-destructive rage. And she was asking me, how do I get rid of this part? You can't get rid of it. You can only make friends with it. Be really curious about it, very compassionately. And when we worked with him, and this woman, little Adolf, turned out to be 1 year old, who just wanted her to feel important. So you have to be curious about all these parts and accept them all, and find out what role they played in your life, why they came along in the first place, what are they trying to do. And as you're doing so, you're strengthening the part of you that's curious and is accepting and is present for them all, and that's the self. So my new friend, this guy who created this form of therapy, internal family systems, Dick Schwartz, talks about self-leadership. And by self-leadership, he means that self that can be curious, that can observe these little parts, that can accept them, that can have compassion for them all. The stronger that self gets, the more that self will guide all these other parts, so they don't take over, they don't run our lives. That's in a nutshell, okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it does. I think it's a piece that really resonated with me, and it's something I'll probably mull over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just realized something in the bathroom. Can I share? I do my best thinking there. No, I'm really excited for you to be okay with me having views of you. I'm just really, and more than that, I really respect it. I really respect what that takes, because I know it hasn't been easy. And you would be fully within your rights to insist on a certain degree of respect and.
Well, no, hold on, that's different.
Shows of respect. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I may choose legitimately, or you may choose for that matter.
Yeah.
At a certain point to say, sorry, this conversation is not working for me.
Correct.
You know,
because accepting doesn't mean tolerating.
Accepting does not mean tolerating.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know.
You're not. I don't think you're giving me a free rein to just
Yeah.
go hog wild now for the rest of my life. But no, but more like that my subjective state is not an existential threat to you, and you don't need to do anything about it.
That's the
you
whole
don't need
point.
to mount a PR campaign.
That's the whole point. I don't have to work so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's some, and I don't know about this, and this may sound like a cop-out to you, but to me it feels like there's something just right about the parent being the one who gets that, and kind of releasing the child from the burden of having to like sort out their internal state. Like, it's just nice that it just feels nice. And once you do that, it's very easy for me to relax into. Yeah, I don't know if I'm right about that. That maybe it could go in. Of course, it can go in either direction. But I respect. But you were talking. It's like the antidote to contempt is respect and honoring. And when I hear you say that, I see not just the person who happens to be my father, but I see the father archetype. I see the king, the actual mature one, the wise one.
Well, thank you. We can all go home now. All right. Thank you.
Oh, it's my mother.
Oh, I'm the mom.
Hi, Mom.
I'm the wife. I'm Ray. I'm married to Gabor. I'm the mother of Daniel. Daniel, I often find myself with you
Yeah.
in the same. If you turn it around, if I am looking at you and I have a point of view about you
Yeah.
that you don't like,
Yeah.
let's say you tell me a joke and I don't think it's funny.
Yeah.
You know, and I respond like you're expecting that I'm going to be impressed, but I sort of, you know, make a face. Are you all right with that? So if your parents don't have the view of you that you would like them to have of you in a particular point, let's say you're feeling really proud of something or whatever, let's say there isn't that kind of attunement, and your parents might have a judgment that you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Are you all right with that? I mean, does it go both ways?
Well, it should, ideally. But I feel like you're not really asking me a question.
Yeah. I was going to ask you
You're
what.
telling me something.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, why are you asking that?
But let me.
Well, it's just, no. It's because I often feel in that position with you.
But that's the statement you made.
I hear
That's a
you.
statement.
That's the statement you're making. Great.
That's a statement.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you for owning that statement.
Thank you for
But there's
pointing
no.
out that it wasn't.
But there's no question there. Okay.
Okay, so
But-
my question is,
Yeah.
does it work both ways?
Well, I actually think what you're asking me is, can you count on me to be as responsible for my reactions to you as I'm demanding or asking of Dad that he be? Is that?
Yeah, do we both get to be the actors?
Well, you know what? And I don't think it's a fair question.
Really?
Well,
Yeah.
hold on, you don't have to defend me. I got this.
I'm not defending you. I'm giving my opinion
I
on the
know.
question. But
I mean,
yeah.
I sort of agree with you, but it's fine.
Yeah.
She can ask an unfair question.
Okay, that's fine.
It's just sort of a weird question to ask during a Q&A. I think. But let me answer it in good faith. Because that's actually how I'd like to deal with in all our dealings, is to answer things in good faith. I think what you're telling me is that you're just as excited about the possibility of a relationship with me where I don't get all incensed when you misunderstand me, or I think you misunderstand me, as I am about Dad making this switch. And I want that too, Mom.
Wonderful.
And as far as does it go both ways, there are times when I don't react and you don't know it because I didn't react. There's plenty of times when I feel misunderstood and I just eat it and I just deal with it and I metabolize it and it's fine. And then there's other times when, and also I can't be sure if you're reading my expressions accurately because it might just be, it was just a failure to communicate. So there's awkwardness in the space. It may not be as big it may not be the contempt that you're seeing or anything like that. So I can't tell what it is you're seeing versus what's going on here. But as far as the question you're asking from your heart, which is, can we have that kind of relationship too? Absolutely, yes, please. Let's start right now.
By the way, when you ask, is it going both ways? We don't know if it's going to go one way yet. I'm just talking about a realization I came to and an intention that I've set for myself.
I'm excited about that intention.
We'll see how it plays out.
No, but I can see it being so liberating for all of us to allow the other not to get them.
Yeah. And I promise you, here's what I can promise you. I'm not trying to play you. Like, I'm not trying to, get Dad to make a promise, say, that then I get to take advantage of forever. Of course, what we're doing up here is mutual and reciprocal. And you get to be a part of it too.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've just witnessed the Maté family at dinner.
And what's really
on a good night.
what's really funny about that is it confirms my suspicion that even if we had 350 people around the dinner table, we'd behave exactly the same way. It wouldn't change a damn thing.
Just want to thank you both for excellent authenticity. It's fantastic. And I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Maté. 36 years ago this month, you helped bring my beautiful daughter to the world, who is here, and my son a few years later. So they're both here.
How many years? 36. You're kidding. Wow.
And
what's your name?
Teresa Bissett.
Oh, hi, Teresa. So nice to see you again.
It's been a while.
Didn't I see one of your kids recently somewhere?
I
Sorry.
don't know. Maybe.
Okay, anyway,
I just
go ahead,
wanted
yeah.
to make one other comment as a parent. And the first time I experienced contempt from my children was at about the age 13, contempt towards me. It knocked me back on my heels, and I thought, how dare you? But I want to publicly here today thank them, actually, for doing that, because I wouldn't be who I am today if they had not shown that contempt.
In what, can we ask you in what way? How did that contempt lead to who you are today?
Oh. It was shocking that it made me question why were they feeling this contempt? Why? What was I doing to elicit this? It was because I certainly wasn't intending to do that.
So what were they seeing? I'm not asking you to answer that, but that's the question you asked yourself, and that's a very what I would call a very sourceful question.
Yes.
Rather than asking why is this happening to me, or my dad's refrain, when do I get a pass?
Yes.
You're asking what are they seeing that I'm not seeing?
Exactly.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I remember, Teresa, I phoned you recently, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Ask your kids how it feels to know that they're the reason I didn't get a story read to me one night. Actually, no. 36 years ago, I would have been, 7, yeah, sure. I still wanted stories at 7.
It's coming from a performance, opera performance, I think, that night.
Oh?
Hi.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for having this conversation tonight.
Thanks.
And leading this. I feel a lot of unity at the room because we're all children or, parents. Me, not yet. Anyway, I wanted to ask about grief. You've mentioned it. Can we hear me? Okay. You mentioned it a few times, and maybe you could comment further on the role of grief in thinking about, this relationship, maybe from the child to parent. And then, if there's any practices or ways to approach that. I'm not going to be here for this weekend, unfortunately, so
Okay.
I'm taking one. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, so what I hear in your question is, what's the role of grief in getting us into the present moment? Because that's the game here, right? Hello again, a fresh start for parents and adult children in the present moment. If you think about grief, what is it? Grief, in a sense, is discharging the past from your system. There's some piece of the past that's stuck in that's still got a hold on you, that you haven't fully come to grips with. And we're not supposed to come to grips with it right away. Let's say when a loved one dies, it's not supposed to be easy to just snap into the next moment. Because there's a whole history there, and there's a big part of our heart that is bound up with that person being alive, and all of a sudden they're not. So what do we do to get into the present moment? Like an animal after an upsetting experience, they'll shake it off, right? Well, we cry, we shake, we grieve, we get together, we get drunk, we have a wake, we party, whatever we have to do. the grieving process, sitting Shiva in the Jewish tradition, right? And it's all about getting us prepared to get back into the present. So if there's things from my childhood that I haven't grieved, they're still with me. The past didn't go anywhere. And every time I get in a room with these people, they get agitated. But they have no way to get out of me because the exits are all blocked up. Because I'm not willing to grieve it. Now, one of the things that I got in touch with this week was actual grief for my childhood experience. I relived the feeling of disorientation, confusion, not knowing where up and down are. I actually had a nightmare I stay in my parents' basement when I'm in town, and I had a nightmare that reminded me exactly of the kinds of nightmares I used to have as a kid, which is actually a nice companion dream to your dreams of raging at me. I dreamed you were raging at me. Which reminds me of the Bob Dylan line, I'll let you be in my dream if I can be in yours. And so, and I woke up out of this dream mouthing the words, I'm sorry, but my mouth was so dry and numb I couldn't say it. And that used to happen all the time as a kid. And being in this home this week with all of this at stake and this workshop happening and, just perfectly life curated this experience for me for it to come up. And I've just been sitting with that was my childhood. It's not all my childhood was, but that's a running theme throughout my childhood, and I can never, ever, 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 ever go back and change that for myself. I can never go back and give myself a different experience because that's how it went. It went the way it went. And rather than being trapped in there's no escape, contempt, resignation, actually the grief allows it to move and say, okay, yes, that is how it was. That's how I experienced it. And here I am. And the next moment, here I am. So grief is, in a certain way, is just a full acknowledgement of what has been without trying to control the emotional response to that acknowledgement, just letting that flow, and then arriving back here in the next moment. So I can't see how that wouldn't help a relationship where the intention is to get to know myself and the other person now.
The other part of it is that it's not the things that happen to us as kids that really has us troubled later on in life, but what we make it mean about ourselves and the world. And that can change. So one can have had the same experiences, but once you realize that you made meaning out of those experiences, you made meaning out of those experiences with the mind of a child and without the support of perhaps adults who understood you, and so you made the only meaning you could out of it. So you don't make yourself wrong for the meaning you made out of your childhood experience, what you made it mean about yourself, about the world, about relationships, about everything. But you don't have to keep making the same meaning that you did as a child. So somebody once said that it's never too late to have a happy childhood, which really means that we can let go of the meanings that we necessarily and automatically, unwittingly, blamelessly created from our experience in childhood, but we don't have to hold on to those meanings.
And what's the role of grief in that? Because that was
the role of grief is that you actually accept that that's what happened, just what you just said. That did happen, but it doesn't mean that such and such. It just happened, and it was painful. I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah.
What time did you say we'd finish at 9 o'clock?
Well, that's what's listed, I think. But let's
look. I think we're going to finish on time. I think that's what I would take over first. We'll take one more question, but before we break, I just want to again encourage you to go to this website, helloagainproject.com.
Helloagainproject.com, and there you can sign up for our mailing list.
And then especially
you'll find out about the podcast when it drops.
But also if you have a story to contribute, like for example, you and your dad, the psychiatrist's dad, I'd love to get that story. If you would send us an email so we can be in touch with you and interview you. But anybody else here who's got anything to contribute or any questions or a story to add, please get in touch with us.
Both this podcast and this book are going to be in some ways a conversation between us and the community that's forming around this work. So, we really...
Please be in touch. Now, any other announcements? We'll take one more question then, and gentleman over there, I guess.
Charlene, it is a 9 o'clock stop time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take the one question.
Okay, well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. My daughter and I came together tonight, and we both had quite a few aha moments, I think. But I just have a comment to make, not a question. And it's sort of a bookend to the birthing thing. 25 years ago, I was in the hospital, and I was out in the hallway crying, and Gabor came by and asked me why, and I told him my dad was dying, and he asked if I would like to put him into palliative care. And I want to thank you for that. I did, and he lasted another day or two, and I was with him in the hospital when he died, and I appreciate that. And so it's just a nice bookend to the birthing story, because that was a nice way to end the relationship. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we take an actual question?
Well, thank you for that, and we'll take one question, and we'll break it up.
So a question ends with a question mark, and it's in the interrogative. You want to know the answer to something? Nothing wrong with that story, thank you.
A little bit of context. I'm adopted. I have known since I was very, very little. I'm adopted. I've known since I was very little. My biological dad does not know about me. My adoptive parents have a very toxic relationship. So I grew up in a very toxic home. And my dad was an alcoholic firefighter born in 1940 in Fernie. He was not emotionally available for me. I resented him. I had a lot of anger, typical teenage stuff, moved out at 17, lived with the anger a long time, and have decided that I don't want to live with the anger that he gave me, but through no fault of his own. So I grieved the loss of a father who chose to bring me into his home while not knowing of my biological father. So I made a choice. I want to have some sort of a relationship with my father.
Your adoptive father?
No, yes, my adoptive father.
Yes.
And some things that you've noted too, the fear of the distrust. He's a 78-year-old man now. Mm-hmm. He, from the outside, is not the man that raised me. Mm-hmm. But that is still there. You talk about the person when you were a child versus the person that your parent is now. But to me, they're synonymous still. He might be a more meek 78-year-old man, but those sparks of rage from him are still very alive at moments. So when I enter their home, I come in defense mode. I come prepared for battle.
Yes.
And I don't want to do that.
Yes.
So I come with compassion and empathy, but I'm still a little child who's very scared and distrusting of her father.
I completely feel you.
So how do you navigate? I grieved for it. This is my boyfriend. We've come together hoping that when we react in our relationship, it is probably because we are reacting to the things that have brought us here, like our parents. Mm-hmm. And how do you move forward in a relationship where you don't like the person and you have a hard time loving somebody who has treated you so poorly by choice, but you want to make the choice to show up for them lovingly?
Real short answer?
Yeah.
Give up the story they treated you poorly by choice.
Right.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
That's your interpretation. Just because he chose to adopt you and he happened to be an alcoholic with an anger management problem, or an anger lack of management problem, doesn't mean he chose to treat you poorly. It's entirely consistent to say he wanted a child, he wanted to raise a child, he didn't know how much pain he was carrying. Just like Gabor said about how would you treat someone who is deaf, dumb, and blind, with compassion and understanding, you still are making it mean something about you that you're the victim of someone's choice and that someone deliberately took something out on you. If you can decouple the grief from the resentment and look at it a bit more objectively, which doesn't mean at all not having compassion for your childhood plight. Mm-hmm. It's actually having more compassion for your childhood plight, because the fact is, through no fault of anybody's, you ended up in a very, very difficult situation.
And not only did you end up in a difficult situation, you came from a difficult situation.
Yes.
So that you were already wired to be abandoned and not to be loved.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't help being wired that way given your adoption and the loss of your birth mom. You know? So you're wired for pain. And it's natural that you feel a lot of pain.